So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, the Detroit Lions are a few days into their training camp process, right? They've had a lot of news coming out, a lot of rumors coming out, a lot of players exceeding expectations, a couple players failing to meet expectations, as well as some rumors about how the Detroit Lions might continue to make this team better before the 2023 season comes around. We have a lot of news and a lot of rumors to go over today, so I want to start off with some of the most recent news that came out as early as this morning, and unfortunately, it's not very good. As wide receiver Tom Kennedy has officially been waived from the Detroit Lions due to an injury concern. Now, Tom Kennedy did practice yesterday and went up over linebacker Jack Campbell to make a very impressive catch with the second team offense, but it was said he came down very awkwardly. He did finish practice, but there was clearly an injury going on in his lower body. He wasn't quite the same after that catch, and this morning he was officially waived by the Detroit Lions. Now, Tom Kennedy is a player that the Detroit Lions love. He's a player that this coaching staff has waived and brought back several times over. After every preseason, it seems that he doesn't make the roster, goes to the practice squad, gets called up in the middle of the season, makes plays, and then gets sent back down to the practice squad. He is a player that isn't the biggest, isn't the fastest, isn't the strongest, but for one reason or another continues to stick on this roster. He's a guy that continues to get open. He's a guy that makes big plays in big moments. He's a guy that has some really strong hands and makes really good catches. And he's a guy that is just a very good, well-rounded wide receiver that does everything he can possibly do to make the roster every single preseason. And somehow every single preseason, he gets denied and put to the practice squad. Now, Tom Kennedy, as I said, was waived due to an injury. Unfortunately, there is not a full disclosure on what that injury is yet or how severe it is, but if he goes unclaimed, I would not be shocked if the Lions bring him back before the end of the preseason, if they bring him back even before the end of training camp, and they let him compete for a wide receiver 6 spot once again. Now, the Detroit Lions have brought in a different wide receiver to replace him, that being Trey Quinn, most recently of the USFL. Now, Trey Quinn, I believe, does have an NFL background, but hasn't played in the NFL in a couple of seasons, and really was good at the USFL, but is likely more of a camp body. There's a lot of wide receivers currently on the Detroit Lions roster that have a good chance of making the roster, but a couple of them are injured, right? Jameson Williams is out today. Marvin Jones is out today. Now, Tom Kennedy has officially been released. I think that they want to get as many people into the room as possible. They're trying to get as much competition as possible in the room with all of the injuries starting to arise. However, I think with all of the players that are on the Detroit Lions right now, and all the players that are even practicing today, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown is out there. Khalif Raymond is out there. Josh Reynolds is out there. You have Dylan Drummond, the UDFA player. You have, of course, Antoine Green, the 7th-round pick, and a couple other UDFA wide receivers the Lions really, really like. I find it very hard to believe that Trey Quinn will end up making the roster, but he is officially on the training camp squad right now and will compete and will be competing for that spot over the next couple of days. Now, moving on to a rumor going around the Detroit Lions. It is very well known around the NFL at this point that Chris Jones, the 4-time All-Pro defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs, is unhappy with his contract situation. Now, Chris Jones was a first-team All-Pro a season ago and a 3-time second-team All-Pro in the years prior. He's a 4-time Pro Bowler with 65 career sacks, 65 career tackles, as well as 146 QB hits. Now, as I said, it is very well documented that Chris Jones and the Kansas City Chiefs are at very different ends of the spectrum when it comes to giving him a new contract. Chris Jones wants an extension now, getting a little bit of financial security going into his age 29 season, as he is reaching the tail end of his physical prime. Now, Chris Jones has been one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL over the last several years. If it wasn't for a player named Aaron Donald, I think he would likely be the best defensive tackle in the NFL over the last half decade. He has been a huge part of the Chiefs' defensive line, a massive part of both of the Chiefs' Super Bowl runs, as well as the Super Bowl loss that they took. He's been a massive part as to why the Chiefs have been the young, growing dynasty that they are. And the Chiefs are likely going to retain him. They will likely reach a deal. They will likely reach a consensus of whether or not they want to keep Chris Jones around. And I am 95% sure that Chris Jones will be a Chief until the day he retires and will likely be a Chief going into next season. But there is that 5% chance. There is that, frustration between him and the organization and the distance between where they think their contracts need to be met. Now, the Detroit Lions could use an interior pass rusher, right? They have Isaiah Buggs. They have Aleem McNeil. They drafted Broderick Martin. They have some young players and some good players at that position, but they're lacking a superstar. And adding Chris Jones to the roster, the word superstar would be an understatement. He would bring a pass rush element to the Detroit Lions. He would bring a superstar factor to the Detroit Lions, and he would make the Detroit Lions, I think, the easy and clear favorites in the NFC North, bringing in another top-tier pass rusher to pair with Aiden Hutchinson, bringing in a true superstar on the defensive side of the ball, and it would likely cost you less than a first-round pick to do. A second-round pick and maybe a late-round pick to go with it to give a extension of likely $25 million a year or something around what Quinnen Williams has been, or what Quinnen Williams received, what some of the other defensive tackles have received this offseason, is likely the going rate of what Chris Jones would require. Now, I'm not saying that it's going to happen. I'm not saying that it is likely to happen, but because there is a possibility, I think there is a reason to speculate and there is a reason to be intrigued. Now, if it costs a second and say a fifth round pick and that contract extension, I think it would be worth that for the Detroit Lions over the next 2 seasons to add a superstar, add a player at a position Brad Holmes very clearly values, and likely put the Detroit Lions as the most talented roster in the NFC North if they're not there already. And if they are, exceed and extend that distance even farther to guarantee or give you the best odds of the NFC North crown and a playoff contender. Now, moving on from the rumors, taking a look at the newest episode of Inside the Den yesterday, the Lions gave away quite a bit of information about their drafting strategy, including the players that they had a first round grade on. Now, it was said and it was learned from the Inside the Den episode that the Lions had just 14 players with a first round grade. They had 14 players they felt comfortable taking inside the top 32, and they got 3 of those players, including Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, as well as Brian Branch, all being in their top 14 prospects, but not grabbing Brian Branch until the 45th overall pick of the 2023 NFL Draft. Now, it was also revealed that the Detroit Lions' original plan in the 2023 draft was to take Devon Witherspoon at 6, a player that we talked about all offseason, a player that we thought would be a top 5, top 6 selection by the Detroit Lions, who ended up going a pick before them at the Seattle Seahawks. That left them in a little bit of a panic, trading back with the Arizona Cardinals to the 12th overall selection, where they selected Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, if they had selected Devon Witherspoon at the 6th overall pick, they likely would have traded up from 18, selecting Jahmyr Gibbs at 12 anyway, meaning Jahmyr Gibbs was probably the one guy they had to have this offseason. He was the guy that they were going to get regardless. That was their Aiden Hutchinson. That was their Penei Sewell. That was their guy this year that they thought had to be a Detroit Lion. But it's very interesting that they only had 14 players, and it was never clearly said whether or not Sam Laporta, the 34th overall pick in the NFL draft and the player selected before Brian Branch, was actually one of those 14 players. Now, the Lions, as I said, got at least 3 of their 14 first-round grades, but did miss out on the cornerback that they were looking for. Now, whether that means the Detroit Lions are still looking for a cornerback remains to be seen. Obviously, they didn't draft one in the remainder of the draft, meaning they either didn't like some of the other cornerback prospects or liked the value of other picks at that time better. But it is a very interesting thing to note, and that leaves the door open for potentially a UDFA like Starling Thomas to come in and play a similar role to Devon Witherspoon while being significantly cheaper, but still having that role and spot available for a cornerback they were going to take at 6. Now, moving on to the final piece of news today, I just want to talk about the fourth day of training camp, talk about the major takeaways from the fourth day, and really take a look at how this team is looking after a couple of days and right before the first padded practice. Now, CJ Gardner-Johnson did go down with a leg injury, a non-contact injury at that, on the second day of camp, but has since been medically cleared to return. He was limited in practice, going over a lot of basic stuff, going over a lot of movement drills, and really taking it very slowly to return to camp, but he was on the field with his teammates, but mostly worked with trainers on the sideline. The defense on day 4 had a massive improvement from the first couple of days as the offense was phenomenal. The defense had more batted passes, they had more pressure on the quarterback and tighter coverage, leading to a lot more incompletions and even a number of turnovers in the team periods. Aiden Hutchinson has been working on a couple new pass rushing moves and had a really good move at the beginning of camp on day 4, beating Penei Sewell, I believe, on the rep and getting pressure on Jared Goff, which would have resulted in a sack if it were a live drill, as well as the kicking battle continuing. Riley Patterson and Parker Romo have both been really good. Both went 4 for 5 in their kicking competition a day ago, and both hit from relatively deep. They've been consistent at camp. They've been really good at the deep ball at camp, and both of them are making a really good case as why they both deserve a roster spot on this team. But with all that being said, that is the biggest and newest batch of news and rumors from the Detroit Lions. A potential trade, a cut, and new signing by the Detroit Lions, as well as camp takeaways and inside the den takeaways from the Lions' most recent sneak peek behind the scenes. But with all that being said, that is life for you guys today. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure you get down below and subscribe to the channel. Helps the channel out a lot. And if you are still here at the end of the video, you clearly like the Lions content. So do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, like the video. And with all that being said, that is life for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.